Hello chaps and chapesses, and this week we're going to talk about the Canon FD 24mm F2.8 SSC lens. The Canon FD 24mm F2.8 is perhaps one of the sharpest and most affordable vintage wide-angle lenses, especially if you're going to adapt to mirrorless cameras. The lens was introduced in 1973 and it replaced the original FD chrome nose, which didn't have the SSC coating. So this one was updated with the SSC coating, which was also then found on Canon's FDN lenses, the later ones that superseded this. It continued with the all-metal construction as the original FD chrome nose, and also the breech lock system rather than the bayonet. The lens measures 66 by 52.5 millimeters in height and depth and has a filter size of 55 millimeters and weighs in at 330 grams, which is quite heavy compared to the later 240 grams of the FDN, but it's a solid chunk of metal and glass. It has a 6-bladed aperture ranging from 2.8 to f16, unlike the FDN, which went up to f22. The minimum focusing distance on this lens is only 30 centimeters, which is actually really useful and makes it far more versatile. And this 24mm is made up of 9 elements in 8 groups. So from an observations perspective, I love this great big curved front element that it has, and these two big elements in the front of this lens are what make it such a strong performer. There's very little distortion in this lens thanks to the free floating element design in the front, and with a minimum aperture of 2.8 it's actually very good in low light situations, subject to whatever camera you have it attached to, of course. For me personally, I just prefer the 24mm focal length. It's not as wide as a 20mm, which gives you that sort of really big perspective, but at the same time, it gives you a much wider frame than the 28mm, for example. And for me, I just like it. It just suits what I like to shoot. Just from the fondling perspective, it's got a lovely, lovely dampened focus throw, and it feels really solid in the hand. And I think that's why, in some ways, I prefer these SSC lenses to the later generation of the FDN lenses, which had far more plastic in them. They just feel much more solid. Feels like a tank. There's only really one way to find out how a lens actually performs, and that's to take it out and shoot it. We're going to take a few shots across here and see how it performs. I'm going to start by shooting at 2.8 and we'll see what we get. It's quite a versatile lens, even though it's only a 24mm prime. I found that it's actually quite useful for not only taking lovely landscape shots like this, but is also quite capable of doing some fairly interesting close-up work. I think one of the things I love about shooting with these old Canon FD lenses, not the FDN lenses, but the old FD SSC lenses, is they're all a metal construction and the focus throw just feels like butter in your hand. It's so smooth but it's nicely dampened. It's such a pleasurable experience just to shoot one. Gotta say, I'm enjoying this 24mm. Luckily, I have a model which will sit for me. Good boy. Just a lovely feel about it. Really love this focus throw. It's just beautifully dampened. The aperture ring just moves around with this very satisfying click, 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 click noise. There's just something beautiful about shooting with manual lenses. It's a real joy. Well, Basil and I have had good fun out this afternoon shooting with this 24mm 2.8, and I'm looking forward to getting it back home, taking a look at some of the pictures and some of the footage. Well, looking at some of the images, I think that it resolves very nicely, and as most of the lenses in this Canon FD SSC range, I think the colour is lovely. I really love the way that these lenses reproduce colours. In testing, it's very sharp in the centre, although it's slightly soft towards the edges, but actually, to be honest, you would expect that with a vintage lens and also a wide-angle lens. On some of my test images, that despite the SSC coating, there is some chromatic aberration, but not enough that it really worries me very much, especially not for the price that you're paying for these. So in conclusion, what do I think of this Canon FD 24mm SSC f2.8? Wow, that's a bit of a mouthful. It's sharp, it performs well in low light, and there's very little distortion. And I think they're very good value for money for a wide-angle lens. You can pick these up on eBay from anything from £60 to about 150. They are a little more expensive than some of the other vintage lenses that you may find, but I think that's because actually that a lot of people tend to hang on to this lens. As always, I hope that video was useful. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you on the next one.